Jesus went into the region of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter said in reply, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus said to him in reply, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly ordered his disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There are some dates that you never forget. I remember exactly where I was on October 27th, 2004, when the Red Sox won their first World Series, or September 11th, 2001, when our nation faced tragedy. But where were you on May 3rd, 2003? I remember exactly where I was on that sad day. I was up at my grandparents' house in Maine, turned on the TV, and there was the headline, "Old Man on the Mountain has fallen." The old man on the mountain was supposed to be more permanent than that. It was the very symbol of the people of New Hampshire that had survived many years on the cold, rocky soil here through cold winters, and yet it had succumbed to the elements finally and fallen with a thud in the night. There's more than one symbol of stability that has come crashing down in the recent years. Some people used to think that the economy would always be healthy, the stock market would always go up, jobs would always be plentiful. Then in 2008, the economy crashed and has never quite fully recovered. Some people used to think that the Catholic Church would always be influential and growing. Converts would come in. Young people would become priests and religious. Children would follow their parents in the faith as if it were all so automatic. And in 2002, the abuse crisis hit the headlines. It was a sign of a deeper loss of faith and direction in the church. In life, in a world where nothing seems permanent, in which values are constantly shifting, that can be a very destabilizing, disorienting place. But it was no different 2,000 years ago. In ancient Palestine, you would have had a life expectancy of about 29 years. Wars and invasions were constant. Religious and political corruption was rampant. And yet in the midst of all those shifting sands, there was a group of people that thought they had found a stable foothold. And a man named Jesus, a carpenter turned prophet who would speak about loving even one's enemies and who called God his own Father. And one of these people dared to even speak his hope out loud. His name was Simon, a fisherman. He said, "Jesus, I have come to believe that you are that rock on which I can build my life. You are the stable foundation that will withstand any storm." And in turn, Jesus gave this Simon a new name, Peter, which means rock in Greek. It was a little bit of a nickname. We might say Rocky today, or the Rock. And he was giving him a new name. The great irony, of course, was that Peter was anything but rock-like by nature. He was famously full of self-doubts. Famously, he was hot one moment and cold the next. He was constantly proclaiming his faith in Jesus one moment and denying him the next. And we're tempted to say, Jesus, why did you choose Peter to be the rock? Couldn't you have found someone better? Couldn't you have chosen James or John or Mary? Wouldn't they have done a better job? Not Peter. But Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew that the church that he was founding would be based not upon the merits of the sinful people who make it up, but upon his grace and mercy, which is undeserved, unmerited, and yet is freely given and has no bounds. Peter wasn't made of rock like the old man on the mountain was, but by putting his faith in Jesus, he had become rock-like. And so Jesus said, "Peter, you're the rock on which I will build my church, and I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." Now, all this talk about giving Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven is where the legend comes from, that it is St. Peter that stands at the pearly gates and welcomes people into heaven. And one day a taxi driver made his way to the pearly gates, and St. Peter welcomed him and looked his name up in his big book. And with a broad smile, he said, yes, you may take a golden staff and a silk robe and go up to the 7th level of heaven. Next person in line was a priest. And again, St. Peter looked him up in a big book, and with a wrinkled brow, he said, well, you can take a wooden staff and a woolen robe and go up to the 2nd level of heaven. The priest was taken aback and began to complain. He said, wait a minute, I was a member of the cloth. I was a man of the cloth. I gave my life to God. Surely I should rank higher than a cabbie here in heaven. St. Peter said, look, here in heaven, we're only interested in results. In life, when you preached, people slept. And when the cabbie drove, people prayed. By the way, the next person in line was a businessman, and he was all excited when he got to the pearly gates. He said, St. Peter, you won't believe it. I had such a wonderful life. I met so many wonderful people, had great experiences. Why, once I met this taxi driver, and I was so late for an appointment. I never thought I would make it, but it was amazing. He drove me downtown at 80 miles per hour, weaving in and out of traffic. Oh, wow, St. Peter said, when did this happen? Oh, about 5 minutes ago. Okay, now what Jesus was not doing, however, was making Peter the door guard to heaven. To understand what Jesus was doing with Peter, we have to remember our other reading from today, from Isaiah, where we hear about a man named Eliakim, who is given a special job, a special office in the kingdom of David. He is appointed to be the master of the palace, which was a type of prime minister under the king. Eliakim, Isaiah says, you are going to become a father to the people of Jerusalem under the king. You are going to have, as a sign of your authority and office, the keys to the kingdom. Just like someone might give you the keys to the city as an honor. You will open and no one will shut. You will shut and no one will open. Well, that's the exact same type of language that Jesus uses for Peter. Peter, you are going to be given the keys to my kingdom. You will bind and no one will loose. You will loose and no one will bind. You see, what Jesus was doing is he was giving Peter an office in his church, under the king, but still important. The role of being a father to the people. Now, like any office, say being President of the United States or Governor of New Hampshire or Queen of England, the office is much bigger than the person who happens to inhabit it at that moment. And so, fortunately, the office was bigger than Peter's rather shaky faith. It was able to survive Peter and be passed on to others who would take on that role of being a father to the people. Someone we might call the Holy Father or Papa or Pope today. And all those people fulfill that same role, that same office of being a father, of being someone who is a point of unity for the church, someone who keeps things together under the king, someone who is able to guide the church in matters of faith and morals in a sure way amid all the shifting sands of history. Again, an office is bigger than a person. That's why Pope Benedict could resign the office of Peter a year and a half ago. Because, again, the man can pass away, but the office goes on. That's why in the history of the church, there have been great saints and terrible sinners who have occupied that chair of Peter. And in one sense, it doesn't really matter, because the church goes on, the office endures. That's actually why we shouldn't make too much of the office of Pope. Some people do that. The Pope is not the king of the church. Jesus is the king of the church. The Pope can't just do whatever he wants, make up whatever rules he wants. The Pope has to serve the gospel of Jesus Christ. He serves under the king, but in that special role. Frequently in the history of the church, I think it becomes clear that Jesus knew what he was doing when he gave the church this office of Peter. Because I think the Pope has a special gift to be able to rally and renew the church and to call her back to the foundations on which she is built, which is our faith in Jesus Christ. And I give thanks to God that in the last year and a half we've had a good shepherd fulfilling that role of Peter in Pope Francis. And since Pope Francis has been elected, he hasn't stopped calling the church back to the foundations on which she is built, reminding the church that we're not a political club or a social club. We are the place where people come to know the love of God in Jesus in this world. To remind the church that we don't just grow automatically as if we were on cruise control, that it takes the hard work and faith of all of us, committed to prayer, committed to being the missionary disciples we are called, baptized to be, to share our faith and invite others into this life-giving relationship with Jesus in the church. Recently, Pope Francis wrote a letter to the church called The Joy of the Gospel. And in that letter, I just want to read a selection from it. It's a little long, but I think we really need to hear it. He says this: "The great danger in today's world, pervaded as it is by consumerism, is the anguish born of a complacent yet covetous heart, the feverish pursuit of frivolous pleasures. Whenever our interior life becomes caught up in its own interests and concerns, there is no longer room for others, no place for the poor. God's voice is no longer heard. The quiet joy of His love is no longer felt. This is a very real danger for believers, too. So I invite all Christians everywhere at this very moment to a renewed personal encounter with Jesus Christ, or at least an openness to letting Him encounter them. No one should think that this invitation is not meant for him or her. God never tires of forgiving us. We are the ones who tire of seeking His mercy. Thanks solely to this encounter, or renewed encounter with God's love, which blossoms into an enriching friendship, we are liberated from our narrowness and our self-absorption. Here we find the source and inspiration of all our efforts at evangelization. For if we have received the love which restores meaning to our lives, how can we fail to share that love with others? An evangelizing community knows that the Lord has taken the initiative. He has loved us first, and therefore we can move forward, boldly taking the initiative, go out to others, seek those who have fallen away, stand at the crossroads and welcome the outcast. Such a community has an endless desire to show mercy to others, the fruit of its own experience of the Father's mercy. Let us try a little harder to take the first step. I dream of a missionary impulse capable of transforming everything, so that the church's customs, ways of doing things, times and schedules, language and structures can be suitably channeled for the evangelization of today's world, rather than for her self-preservation. If we attempt to put all things in a missionary key, this will also affect the way we communicate the message of Jesus. We need to be realistic and not assume that our audience understands the full background of what we are saying, or is capable of relating what we say, especially about the church's moral teaching, to the very heart of the gospel, which gives it meaning and beauty. The message has to concentrate on the essentials, on what is most beautiful and most necessary. So let us go forth then. Let us go forth to offer everyone the life of Jesus Christ. If something should rightly disturb us and trouble our consciences, it is the fact that so many of our brothers and sisters are living without the strength, light, and consolation born of friendship with Jesus, without a community of faith to support them. More than by a fear of going astray, my hope is that we will be moved by a fear of remaining shut up within structures which give us a false sense of security, within rules which make us harsh judges, within habits which make us feel safe, while at our door people are starving, and Jesus does not tire of saying to us, "Give them something to eat." You see, Pope Francis, in the role of Peter, is calling the church back to its foundations, to what we are here to do, which is not to be comfortable in church in our own little world, but to not be afraid to go out and to become uncomfortable. Jesus once promised Peter that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. And in our uncertain age, when pillars of civilization crumble and even the old man on the mountain falls down, I think we are tempted to hear that statement incorrectly. As if Jesus were saying that the enemies are always going to be at our gates, and we're always going to be under attack, and that we should just hunker down and not let them in. But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. When are you at your enemy's gates? Not when you're under siege, but when you're on the attack, when you're on the offensive. All that is left is to sweep away the enemy's gates and to ride on to victory, and those gates won't hold against you, Jesus says. Don't be afraid to go out, Jesus says, and to break down the walls that divide you and someone else, to form community, to share your faith in Jesus. Build your life on the rock. Stand firm with Peter and the church. Stand firm to your faith in Jesus Christ, and you will become a rock that will never fall.